इंसान परेशान सुनने वाला बेईमान इंसान परेशान फिर भी चालू है ये काम.
Hi Jayesh, welcome back in Conversation. This has been a really meaningful series and I believe people have been enjoying it as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
So for today, let's talk about the book. Perhaps starting with what inspired you to write the book?
I think this perennial problem that people have is to work very hard to make money. And then people continue to work hard to make money on their money. And that's sort of end of life. And so my inspiration was that can we influence people to take a deeper look at that part of their life on making money on money. That's one. The other is that millennials of Indian diaspora kids, they will inherit hundreds of millions of dollars all over the world. So how do we inspire them to do something meaningful? Because most of them are looking for purpose and mission in life. So those are the two main inspirations.
Yeah. And were there any favorites from the interviews that you did? Anything that stood out for you?
Oh, I mean, as someone who's compiled these interviews and done these interviews, I think it won't be fair to sort of single one out. But I think I can certainly say that which one got a lot of rave reviews or people who wanted to meet the person or talk to the person, learn from the person or learn from that model of giving, because ultimately all the stories were about giving back in different models, I think was probably Naveen Bhatt. So obviously there are some amazing people who have large trusts that they run, for example Tata Trust, and then Rohini and Nandan Nilekani, they of course have their trust as well, and Mohandas Pai has this trust, Sanjeev Bikhchandani, so many amazing people. But Naveen Bhatt is looks at himself as a commoner, husband wife, both PhDs, senior executives in companies. So it's somebody that you can relate to.
Yeah.
It's not this billionaire who's got a thesis of giving back, and that's complicated. For professionals and entrepreneurs, especially millennials, I think it's a model which resonates with them and resonated with me as well, which was very interesting.
Yeah. And just taking a step back, why do you feel these perspectives on wealth are important, say even for the millennials that you spoke of, and for people who are looking to give back?
Yeah, I think the title of the book is "What Shall We Do with All This Money?"
Yeah.
And people basically point to someone else saying it's not me. The idea is not this much money is how much money. This much money is whatever you have.
Yeah.
So whatever amount of money you have, that is the money. What shall we do with this money? And that assumes that you're not hand to mouth. So therefore, you have a little bit extra left over. Now that money that is left over, you're saying, well, I need to accumulate it for my after years. And so, but at some point in time, are you going to wait, right, till you're almost near end of life and then say, okay, now let me start giving back? Or can you start the process of giving back from now? Right? So that's one really very important thing. And most people don't have an idea of how to give back, right? And so I think part of it is this whole conversation about, well, what shall we do with all this money? Inspiring perspectives on wealth. And why it's inspiring perspectives, because so many different kinds of models come out which hopefully will resonate with each one of your readers.
Yeah. So you're saying it's not so much about all the money, but it's about as much money as different people have, and then just putting out models for people to think about see what resonates.
Think about giving back. Think about giving back is where I know exactly what I want to do. One is I don't know what I want to do.
Right.
I'm looking for ideas.
Yeah.
So from these books you can get ideas.
Yeah.
Then second step is, well, how much? So there's an allocation conversation saying, well, how much of it? And that's a personal journey, right? It's a personal decision. So that's the second part. And third is whether you want to build your own empire and grow it like a business. So a lot of entrepreneurs like the idea that, okay, this is my thesis, this is how I'm going to give back, for example, education, and I'm going to grow and grow and grow. So I'm building a school, primary schools, and I'm going to grow that. So it's like a business,
right,
but in a social enterprise.
Yeah. And you mentioned that at times we may not know how to go about it. Do you feel there is a gap in us learning, and this could be in the early years, on just in terms of what money is, saving, investing, giving back, charity, all of these things. Do we talk about it enough, or do you feel there's a gap?
I think people talk about it, and people who are urban affluents, they see it all the time around them. So managing your own wealth, there is enough conversation in a city like Singapore or San Francisco or New York or Mumbai. I think there's enough conversation on it. Allocation of the giving, maybe there isn't enough. There are not enough models out there for people to get inspired by and say, hey, this is how I'd like to give back.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that is your personal biases.
Right.
So if I'm connected to India and I know India needs a lot of help, then my allocation is limited. I can't give to the whole world, so I'll give to India. Within India, do I want to give to Mumbai? Do I want to give to Gujarat? What do I want to do? Then some people want to do health. Some people want to do, so for example, I support Akhand Jyoti Eye Hospital because that's meaningful to me.
Right.
Whereas somebody could say that I want to do edutech. So they might want to give to education, somebody to healthcare. So whatever those personal biases are, if you apply them, then it becomes a lot more fun and a lot more meaningful, both. If it is not fun and you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, it's not good fun. And the other part is that where you're just not, I'm not suggesting that you focus totally on outcome measurement, because a part of it is your journey of giving. You have to overlay that with the outcome measurement.
Yeah, and this is interesting because, and this could be individual and how one perceives giving back. What is your take, and I'd like to hear even your own personal opinion on, what is the mindset with which one gives back? Is there an outcome measurement attached to it? And what was your, experience just speaking to a whole lot of people? What's the intention with which the giving back is happening?
So, one unfortunate thing that you discover everywhere in the world is that even in giving, they're looking for bragging rights, right? And I'm okay with it, because I'd rather have someone give it, even if it is for bragging right, it's better than not giving. So let's give.
Okay.
But they want a board outside the school, right?
Which
outside the hospital,
all the time,
right?
Buildings,
which is fine.
boards,
Okay, that's what is something that's meaningful to you, and that inspires you to give more and more and more. So more schools, more hospitals. I'm okay with that. So that's one reason. The other is there are people who do Western style of giving, which is totally outcome measurement. So everything is nickel and dime and meticulously, all properly saying every dollar has to go and make that specific outcome of impact. So impact measurement and a Western philosophy. But the third most important one is the journey. Are you doing this because you want to make a name? Are you doing this because you want to prove your thesis of giving?
Yeah.
Or are you doing to just measure that impact and feel very good saying, aha, I have cracked the code so that every dollar I give, my outcome measurement is fantastic. I'm not suggesting that you should not do outcome measurement, but don't forget to focus on your personal journey, because you're doing it for yourself. At the end of the day, it affects you as much as it affects all the people you're doing good for.
Yeah. So was that the trend that you noticed?
I think that different people have different, the more significant the wealth, the more trauma they had about outcome measurement. So they organized themselves, they had office with staff who were obviously working for the foundation or the charitable trust, and therefore there had to be a soft process and a system. You can't tell them that you are here for a journey, obviously. So therein lies the difficulty. So the bigger they were, the bigger they are, they have to put processes and systems and outcome measurement.
Correct.
Otherwise it will become chaotic. So that's one part of it. But I know, and many of the folks who were in the interviews talked about their personal journey as well. So whether they keep an allocation for themselves and for their own giving, but that spontaneous giving, I think is something that youngsters, millennials, will probably connect to a lot more, because typically a millennial is not an empire builder. And when I say empire builder, meaning I'm going to set up a $1 billion giving with 300 people working for me, with a name which has a brand which is known all over the world. That kind of empire building, I think, doesn't naturally come to a millennial.
Okay. And So were there differences in perspectives? And I know you spoke for the book, you spoke to millennials as well. Did you find it very different in
Yes.
their ways of giving?
Absolutely. I think that millennials start with a mission and a purpose of what they believe in. A patriarch will typically look at their own village and see if there is a school missing or a hospital missing, and that's the entrance. Whereas for millennial, the entrance is, okay, what's out there?
Yeah.
Mental health. Okay, so then I want to do something for mental health. So their bigger picture mission is a lot more, a lot wider. And so then when they find something meaningful, even within that thread, for example, mental wellness, then they want to jump in there,
Yeah.
not with a view that I'm going to build an empire though, right? With a view that can I do good to more people in a meaningful way? Then of course if it scales, it scales.
Yeah. And this is again, like you said, I think it's personal in terms of when is it enough, and how much does one want to allocate when it comes to allocating. How did you think through when it is enough and now it's time for me to start investing, or were you always not investing but giving back?
Yes.
And were you always doing that?
There are three things in that giving.
Yeah.
One of which is money. But there are the other two which are extremely important. One is your personal time, right? And three is your personal skills, knowledge, experience, managerial skills, financial skills, etc. So your personal skills you have enough of.
Yeah.
You can easily share and give it to some non-profits or or organizations. Time
Yeah.
is also as tough, because especially if you have family and you're working on a job or an enterprise. But the third piece is money. Now, allocating all three is as difficult as any one of them.
Yeah.
But in terms of money, I think from the time of IBM is the first time I started giving. And they have United Way. And so there was monthly deductions in United Way.
Right.
And so I started my journey from them. Then I participated in helping in United Way. I ended up being on the board of United Way International for 6 years, which was absolutely a fascinating journey to start from there and end up where I did. I think that, as far as my personal giving philosophy is concerned, I have three different buckets for it. One of them, first of course, I had this tough problem to say, how much would you allocate? And one thing I decided is that I don't want to wait till I die. So I can just put it in my will and I say, okay, when I die, just give X percentage to this particular charity. That was one way to be giving.
Yeah.
The other is, while I'm alive, I want to give. So that was the construct under which I operate. And so I've allocated, and that allocation keeps increasing every year, which has three components. One component is giving for calamity. So whether there is things like COVID, whether it's things like tsunamis or earthquakes and things like that. So that's giving. The philosophy there is that when you give, good happens, but nothing comes back economically. Impact only comes back, singular.
Yes.
When you do micro lending, like I do micro lending to Milap, for example, then when you give, good happens, but the money comes back. And you circulate that money back and forth, right? So it's a relatively low risk return that keeps coming back to you, right? But good is happening. And then the third is investing in social enterprises for equity, right? So this is social impact startups, and these startups are for-profit startups,
Right.
which take money for equity.
Yeah.
In many cases, while doing good, it dies, but in many cases, that money comes back manyfold back to me, and I circle it back.
So you look at all these three as giving.
All the three. The maximum time I have spent until recently was in the social impact equity investment, but lately now I have shifted my attention to Akhand Jyoti Eye Hospital, because that's a non-profit, and even there I'm trying to find some social enterprise like Vision Center. So there is optical stores which are for profit. The profit of that is plowed back into the non-profit to do surgeries. So we're trying to find some mixed models of non-profit and for-profit.
Awesome. And when it comes to, say, people who are younger, and you said perhaps they don't tend to set up the bigger enterprises around this. How can we, and perhaps some of them might be inheriting a lot of money. How do you see that play out, and what should they be thinking about in terms of large inheritance?
Yeah. So one part of it is where there are education and health tech startups which are scaling. You look at many education startups in India, for example, also health tech startups, they do grow. So these are entrepreneurs who want to build an empire,
Yeah.
but with a specific outcome of social impact.
Right.
Whereas in the other cases, if it's a tech, digital payment, all of those,
Yeah.
they're just doing it for the usefulness of the product or services. For a millennial who is affluent, who's going to inherit a lot of money, the folks that are in the book who have spoken, many of them are forming their thesis, many are already on their way to building a non-profit or a for-profit startup,
Right.
and they have the ammunition of money, so they don't have to worry about that. But the rest of it, they still have to worry, right?
So this, I ask you this because just to see how perhaps you have thought about this. When, and this is about our relationship with money, do you feel at any point our relationship with money can get toxic, and is it important to start thinking about the aspect of giving, or to each his own? How do you think about
I
it?
think therein lies this early stages of mindfulness, for example, mental well-being, compassion. I think a lot of it is also who you hang out with. So you're lucky and inherently you have that ability to give, then you build on it.
Yeah.
But if your mind and the heart is in the right place, and you do know that you do want to do it, and you put a little bit of effort into it,
Right.
and meet and hang out with people who are like-minded, who are mission-oriented.
Yeah.
So people are either mission-oriented, pocket-oriented, or ego-oriented. So if you meet those people who are mission-oriented, then you will find your place, where you'll find someone who says, hey Sonam, let's do a mental health startup. And you'll say, what can you do, what can I do? And what do you have? Say, I have money. Sonam, what do you have? Say, well, I can set up this entire mental wellness. Included in it is mindfulness and coaching and all these other, whatever these other issues are. But the thing is that if you are not aware of it, then half the battle is lost.
Right. So in terms of next steps with the book, Jayesh, do you see how the impact in a way unfolding in any particular manner? The intentions that you had?
Well, yeah. So first is that I was quite surprised at the number of books that got read, and number of books that got sold and read. Hopefully they read it. And then also it came out as an e-book, but COVID has hit now, so it hasn't really gone across the world. We're still in this region, in Singapore and India corridor so far. But I was quite taken aback at the kind of feedback that I got, the kind of response that I got. And I think it ended up in a role where I was the pivot for networking, right? So people were interested in this model or that model or this person or that person, and I was sort of busy connecting to a point where then I could not stay engaged in the conversation.
Yeah.
I had to connect and pass, assuming that they're going to continue to do their thing. So that was really quite heartwarming in a way that I didn't specifically have any outcome measurement in mind, saying, okay, I'm writing this book because I wanted to have X percentage of impact increase, or Y percentage of people coming into the fold. And I didn't have that I was just doing this as a journey, saying, hey, I think here is just amazing people that I know. Let me compile their interview and present it, and you take what you want out of it. But I did not even have a conclusion that this is what you should be doing. You get something else out of your book. She gets something else, I get something else. Everybody got what they want out of that book, and you just extract that and run with it.
Yeah. So there is, at this point in time, you feel satisfied with the outcomes that you wanted from the book.
It's not completely done, but for Singapore and India, it's kind of done for right now. As in, it's launched and people have read it and people have talked about it and all that, and people are still buying it. US is missing, UK is missing, because we were supposed to go on a trip and that hasn't happened. Next year, hopefully that will happen. The other outcome is that my publisher wants me to write another book. My friends wanted me to write another book, and they said, well, okay, so what is the option? So one is that the thesis of wealth affluence, time affluence, and mind affluence. We talked about that the last time. And so they said, write on time affluence. So that was one subject. The other subject is saying, hey, listen, you're trying to influence the millennials. So let's do a book on next gen. What shall we do with this money? So that was quite attractive to me. Then the whole book was interviews with millennials. Okay. And then as I started talking to the millennials basically came back and said, can we change the format of it? If you give me a book of few hundred pages and tell me to read 20, 30 interviews, that's okay. But wouldn't it be more fun if we did a fireside chat? Because I did a launch in Singapore where there was a fireside chat.
Yeah.
And people said that, hey, we enjoyed this a lot more.
Right.
Then, sort of keep
Yeah.
reading books after books after books. So the new thesis is that in Singapore and all the cities in India and US and UK and other places, Australia, I will have fireside chats only with millennials,
Right.
where one person like you or whoever is interviewing conversation with me,
Yeah.
and these folks are doing a Q&A with me,
Correct.
but it's limited to 15-20 people in a room,
Got it.
having deep conversation of what they are influenced by, what they are aware of, what they want to do, because each city is different. So somebody in Perth may have different conversations
Yeah.
versus somebody doing it in Australia, in Austin, for example, somebody doing it in San Francisco, somebody doing it in Mumbai.
Yeah.
And so I think, to me, that's also easier. I mean,
Right.
compiling a book, writing a book,
Yeah.
editing a book, and selling a book, it's really a huge task.
It's a lot of work, yes.
Lot of work.
Yeah.
Whereas this is completely up my alley, and I really enjoy hanging out, talking to this millennial, and giving them ideas, thoughts, support, mission, and connecting them to each other and to folks in the ecosystem.
I'm sure a lot of people will value that. So how does one connect with these fireside chats? Is
Right.
anything
So
planned?
once we start traveling,
Yeah.
then we'll announce it. So I already have my first person who's going to do a fireside chat in Singapore.
Awesome.
She's ready to go, except that we are not meeting right now.
Yeah.
But when the situation fixes itself, then I mean, it should be out there in the on the websites and
Awesome.
on social media.
Yeah.
So we'll announce it on Facebook. We'll put it on allthismoney.com. So allthismoney.com is the website for the book.
Yes.
So we'll put it there and we'll put it on social
And
media.
I will link all the websites, including your personal handles, onto our YouTube channel and everywhere. To wrap up, Jayesh, little bit of a macro question. How do you look at suffering? And we spoke about giving back and the intentions around it. Just your perspective on suffering in the world.
So one can feel compassion, one can feel sympathy. There are folks who feel pity, which I think is extreme. But my personal journey on suffering is that I don't dwell on it too much, other than what can I do about it. So the first time I went to Mastichak in Bihar, and I watched the plight of bilaterally blind cataract people, and my mind just went to work on that, saying, okay, I can sympathize, I can do compassion, and I can say, okay, and maybe put a few bucks to it. But I think the more important thing is, what can I do about it? So I focus on that. That's what I would I urge people to see that, hey, is there something about suffering, whether it's mental wellness or whether it's hunger, whether it's education, whether it's agrarian economy, is there a place where you feel that there are people who are trying to plant trees and they don't want to see the forests go away, so people are working on environment. So whatever it is that your subject is on which you feel huge pressure and in watching and can't see the suffering, if you act upon it, I think that's really the journey. Other than that, I have no idea why it happens to whomever it happens, and it's an unknown, and I don't dwell on it.
Well, beautifully summed up. I think, like you said, it's finding that balance between not being too attached to perhaps the suffering that one sees, being able to let that compassion flow while bringing in the action to enable and to help. Thank you, Jayesh. Thank you. This has been great fun, very enriching. Thank you for your time, and I hope everybody watching has enjoyed it as well.
And I enjoyed it as well. I mean, this was really good fun to go through these 3 sessions, and thank you so much to each one of you, and to you, Sonam.
Thank you.